Hello. So relationships, huge part of the gospel, right? And how we perceive who we are often comes from our relationships with other people. We gain our first sense of who we are and how the world works from the relationship that we have with our parents or the people who raise us. We're very, very dependent on others from childhood in order to meet our very basic needs. And sometimes we don't fully grow out of that, and that can cause a lot of problems into adulthood. And so the next series of videos that I'm going to be making and posting are going to specifically be about different aspects of relationships, whether that is romantic relationships or other kinds of relationships in general. So today's video, I'm going to get a little bit vulnerable about my history of I guess you can call them book crushes, or when you're watching a movie and you have a celebrity crush, or you're reading a really good book and you're like, oh, Mr. Darcy, which I was never that girl, but there's a lot of people out there in love with Mr. Darcy. But that phenomenon, that thing of having a crush on a fictional character, or being in love with someone else's relationship, being able to experience it vicariously through them, that's a thing that has been studied. In fact, I wrote a paper all about that phenomenon in my undergraduate time at BYU that got published. And so, pat myself on the back there, little plug for myself. No, but I wrote this passion paper, this research paper, because I realized that phenomenon, aka, if you're wondering what the scientific terminology is, it is called a parasocial romantic attachment. Whew, I still remember that. And so I wrote all about this parasocial romantic attachment and the detrimental effects it can have in our expectations of romance and our experience of relationships. And I'll attach a link in the description box to that paper if you're interested in reading it. Yeah, I don't know if you will be, but I found it quite fascinating. At least people I share it with also find it fascinating. So just in case you're curious, but I digress. So essentially, how I became passionate about the subject was because I came to realize that my expectations of what a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship looks like, or what a marriage should look like, came primarily from movies, TV shows, romance books, and honestly, according to research, those are terrible sources to get those ideals from, because they are overly romanticized. Not to mention that, primarily women are writing these romance books, and so they're writing, from a female perspective of what they want or what they experience. And so when they're writing from both a female and male perspective, you're not getting a full picture of, the complexities that come into a relationship. Man, now I sound like kind of judging them. Not to judge them, but men and women do approach relationships and romance differently. And when you are only getting one side of the coin or one side of the story, you're not aware of other important aspects that are affecting a relationship. Not to mention, we often fantasize, like, the reason that these things are entertainment is because it's pleasing to us. The idea of it's exciting, it's ideal, it's what we want and desire. And so real life is not like that. Like, it's literally entertainment that we go to escape reality sometimes, to distract ourselves or entertain ourselves. We watch the ideal or exciting or perfection scenario, and real life is not like that. And so as you're watching these shows and these movies, you're getting these unconscious, implicit messages about what relationships are, what they look like, how they form. And you may not even realize it, but that's how you come to see how your relationships in the real world should look like or work. And not even just from media, but from our culture. So from the church culture, we have this big drive, this big push on marriage. And, marry young, eternal marriage, like, that's the next step after your mission. And those kind of messages can make it seem like our lives are put on hold until we get married, or we're a menace to society until we're married. Anyways, so many thoughts, so many tangents. I could go on, but I just want to finish describing some of the research I did while researching about the effects that society and culture can have on our perception of relationships. So you have the media telling you, you know, this is how you should feel when you're in a relationship. You're always going to feel excited. You're always going to feel passionate. You're always going to have that chemical attraction or special bond or spark. It's going to be a whirlwind romance. And they just show all the fun parts, and then happily ever after, you got together, you're married. And then they don't show what's next. And so oftentimes you think like, okay, my happily ever after is when I get married. When I get in a relationship, I'll be happily ever after. When I get married, I'll be happily ever after. So you're kind of taught that mindset. And then when you're in a relationship and the chemistry starts to die, or you're mad at your partner, or I don't know, just it's not going perfectly and you're not blissfully always completely happy, then you start to wonder, oh no, I messed up. I did it wrong. This isn't what I thought it would, like, this must not be right, because, you know, it's hard. And I am not attracted to my partner right now. I'm actually really annoyed with them or angry at them or X, Y, and Z. And part of, you know, we have this perception of eternal marriage, and in sickness and in health, for richer or for poor. Even knowing that, we still have this expectation that marriage will make us happy and richer and healthier. And so then when it's not going that way, we start to question, we start to doubt, and we start to worry, oh no, did I, like, all the good parts passed, now it's just going to be hard forevermore, and it's never going to go back to being happy, and I'm never going to find them attractive again, or we're never going to have that spark again. And so oftentimes people will get anxious and, you know, draw out of the relationship and break up or divorce or turn to other sources for that excitement or fulfillment. And so that is one of the reasons that romantic books and movies and other media sources can be so harmful, because it's telling you so much, so frequently, that you start to believe it, what relationships should look like, should feel like, and it's just simply not true. So, for example, you can expect your partner to act a certain way, to be a certain way, to be able to read your mind. You know, if I have to tell them exactly what I want, it's just not as romantic. I need an Edward in my life from Twilight that can just read my mind so that they can fulfill every need and wish I have, without me having to tell them. Like, how romantic is that? So you have books that are, you know, perpetuating all these stereotypes of the men and women reading each other's minds to know what to give each other, of intense and frequent or always present, you know, attraction and sexual desire and drive, just like intense feelings all the time. In reality, that's just not how it is. We have so many responsibilities. We have work, we have school or education, we have families, raising children, parenting. There's so many aspects to life that we have to learn how to function different ways at different times in our different roles and be able to balance it all. And so just like always feeling a certain way is not reasonable. It is not the reality. And that's okay. That doesn't mean you're not going to have a happy, fun, fulfilled life, but you just have to know what the reality is, because otherwise you're setting yourself up for disappointment with those unrealistic expectations. Another myth that is perpetuated by media is the soulmate, where, you know, there's exactly one person that's right for you and you'll feel, you know, attracted to them and only them, like with going back to Twilight, I guess, or the werewolf stereotypes of like imprinting or soulmates. And that also is simply not true. From the gospel standpoint, we know, we've been told that there are many worthy young men and young women that are compatible with each other, and that the most important thing is commitment to making it work together. Obviously, you are more compatible to some than others. Don't just settle for anyone. Yes, you know, they do need to meet certain standards, You're not just going to marry anyone. Yes, you should be attracted to them. Yes, you should love their sense of humor, and get along with them and have things in common. Sure, yeah, that's great. But they don't have to be your perfect soulmate. In fact, you're never going to find someone who's perfect because we're all imperfect. And as one of the apostles said, what makes you think that even if you found the perfect person, that they're going to want you? Because guess what? You're not perfect either. And so it's this joining of two imperfect people who are coming together with realistic expectations, with acknowledging that everything's not always going to be easy. Everything's not always going to be perfect and romanticized. And that's okay, because we can still be happy. And that leads me to one of the most important truths that I can share with you in this video is other people are not responsible for your happiness. As the prophet said many times, and it's been repeated by many apostles and leaders, the circumstances in our life have little to do with our happiness. It's the focus of our life. Our focus on Jesus Christ and on gratitude leads to happiness no matter our circumstance. And that's true with relationships. Another huge myth that we're fed from a young age, from media and from everyone basically, is that you're never going to be completely happy until you're married. That having a relationship, having a partner, having a marriage, a romantic partner, all of that goodness, that's what is going to lead to bliss and happiness. And it's basically this message that you are not complete until you're married and have your other half. And we hear that in so many different ways. We hear that in expressions of gratitude from couples up at the pulpit, just like, oh, she's my better half, or I didn't feel complete until I had them in my life. And that's simply not true, because relying on another person for our happiness is relying on a circumstance and something external outside of ourselves. And that is simply not a gospel truth. Rather, it's internal, our focus on the inside, that determines our happiness. And as we are one with God, just as the scriptures command us to be, then God is inside of us. We are inside of God. We are one. And that internal focus on God and becoming like Him and living up to our potential as sons and daughters of God, that's where happiness comes from. He has given us all the tools necessary for us to achieve the most happiness possible on our own. And the recipe for happiness is laid out in the scriptures. It is simply to keep the commandments of God, to try our very best to become like God. And yes, part of becoming like God is getting married, just like God is married, right? So yes, in order to reach the highest degree of exaltation in the celestial kingdom, the highest degree of glory, we have to be married. But that is not up to us. Marriage is the agency of two people, and so that's a commandment that has been given to us that we don't have full control over to keep, in a sense. But I just want to reiterate that marriage is a commandment, that we are commanded to get married. The act of marriage itself doesn't complete us or make us happy or bring us blissful joy. Rather, fulfilling a commandment is what can bring more blessings, right? And so we can live to our fullest capability the commandments of God and live a very rich, fulfilling, happy, blessed life. When you think about Moroni in the Book of Mormon, in the last couple chapters of the Book of Mormon, you have this guy who is lonely, who is being hunted down by people who hate Christ and the followers of Christ. He has nowhere to turn. He's just like a pretty lonely dude. Like, he has to hide out so that he's not killed. His dad was killed. All the followers of Christ, all the people he's known are killed. All the people that he's left with reject Christ, and just awful, awful things are happening in the world around him. And yet that is the person who gives us some of the most beautiful chapters on charity, on love, on following the Spirit, and knowing how to discern between good and evil, and how to follow good promptings. Just some of the most beautiful passages about charity and the pure love of Christ and becoming like Jesus Christ come from this man who is so lonely, and in a world where the lack of empathy and the lack of charity is so stark and evident. And that's because he in and of himself developed a relationship with Jesus Christ and lived a lifestyle that enabled him to have a life full of rich blessings and joy despite all of the craziness and wickedness going on around him. And as you come to, in and of yourself, live a life congruent with living the commandments of God and striving to become like Jesus Christ, the most happiness you can ever experience will come to you. And God knows that he knows the righteous desires of your heart. He knows if you want to be married and have children, and it's going to happen in his time, and he's not going to withhold those blessings from you. And so he's going to send you blessings. Even just having a desire to be married and having a desire to be a mother or a father, you can experience a fullness of joy here and now. And it's taking that attitude of, I have the capability to make myself happy. I don't need anyone else to make me happy, because I am my own person and I am a daughter or son of God, and I have that power in me. And it's taking that attitude and that joy into a relationship that puts you in the best circumstances to be in a relationship. So it's that attitude that makes it so that you are ready to then complete the commandment that God has given to get married. And so the purpose of getting married is to fulfill a commandment. You should get married to keep the commandments of God. And I know that sounds weird, but hopefully with everything I've just said, it's starting to make sense that you're not getting married so that other people can fill you up and fill your bucket and make you feel better about yourself. You're not getting married to keep up appearances. And when you get married, often we are not the most mature individuals. We have a lot of growing up to do our entire lives. And so when we do get married, we're still not the most mature ever. And so sometimes we find ourselves having these unrealistic expectations and not being happy in our marriage and having contention. And so then we think, well, we just need to have kids to solve our problems, right? Because having kids is going to solve your problems. So then they have kids thinking that will solve their marriage. And again, I want to say that having children is a commandment of God. And when you decide to have children, it should be coming from a place of, we are in this together, we are married, we are equal partners, we are living all of God's commandments, and we want to follow this next commandment to have children. And yes, it's going to be hard, and yes, it's going to be a lot of work, but blessings will come, strength and help and angels will come to help us keep this commandment, and joy will come from keeping this commandment. Like all commandments, marriage is not easy, having children is not easy, but happiness comes from keeping the commandments of God. And for all of you single people out there, just recognize that not all commandments are ones that you can keep perfectly or that you can keep on your own. And so in that sense, just because you aren't married and doesn't mean you're breaking the commandment to get married, right? It'll come when the time is right. And having that desire is enough for now until the time does come. And just, that desire that you have in your heart, God sees that and recognizes that and will bless you for that desire. And he will bless you with the opportunity one day. So with all of that being said, my next video is going to talk about differentiation, particularly emotional differentiation, and how we can truly be happy and content and peaceful with ourselves, no matter who we are with. Basically, I'll get more into it in the video, but if you're holding on to the belief that you need other people to make you feel worthy and to lift you up and to basically, if you have that mindset that you're only okay if your significant other is okay, or you're only okay if your mom is okay, that emotional dependency on them is actually harmful in a lot of ways. And so I want to get more into that in the next video. And so stay tuned, and we're going to talk all about that next time. Thanks for watching.